Let's get to it. Number 10. The Clover Leaf Map, Bünting Map. Imagine a world where geology doesn't matter, tectonic plates don't exist, and the shape of the planet isn't dictated by magma or erosion, but a Sunday school lesson. In the late 16th century, the world was expanding rapidly. Explorers were returning with charts of new continents and jagged coastlines. But in 1581, a German pastor and theologian named Heinrich Bünting looked at this influx of new chaotic data and decided he didn't like it. He believed that if God created the world, God would have been a better designer than that. He didn't want a map that showed the world as it was. He wanted a map that showed the world as it ought to be. So he took an eraser to reality. He decided to force the chaos of the physical world into a shape of perfect, divine symmetry, valuing spiritual order over physical truth. Look at the image on your screen right now. This is the woodcut from his book, Itinerarium Sacrum Scripture. It ignores geography entirely for faith. He forced the three known continents, Europe, Asia, and Africa, into these three distinct leaves of a clover, representing the Holy Trinity. But look at the button holding it all together. That is Jerusalem. To Bünting, you could physically walk from the pyramids to the Colosseum, but you had to go through the Holy City to get there. And the best part? Look at the bottom left corner. That tiny, sad blob is America. It's an afterthought. He barely admits it exists because the New World ruined his perfect design. The logical explanation is that Bünting never intended this to be used for travel. It was symbolic cartography, a diagram of faith rather than dirt. It was a metaphor, meant to be read like a poem, not a GPS. But looking at it forces you to realize that for centuries, humanity didn't navigate by the stars or the coastlines, but by their beliefs. We projected our internal desire for order onto an external world that is inherently chaotic. It begs the question, how much of our current scientific worldview is just another shape we forced onto reality because it makes us feel safe? Number 9. The Ebstorf Map. We tend to think of maps as pieces of paper you fold up in a glove box or images on a screen. But imagine a map so large, so all-consuming, that it physically dwarfs the human observer. Sometime in the 13th century, inside a Benedictine monastery in Germany, an army of monks created a monstrosity. It wasn't just a map of the land. It was a map of everything that had ever happened, every myth that had ever been told, and every beast that had ever breathed. It was a Mappa Mundi, roughly the size of a studio apartment, painted on 30 goat skins sewn together. It was designed to overwhelm the viewer, to make them feel small in the face of creation. Feast your eyes on this chaos. This is the Ebstorf map. The original was enormous, about 12 feet by 12 feet. But the geography is the least interesting part. Look at the very top. That isn't a king. That is the head of Christ. Now look at the edges. See that hand on the right? And look all the way at the bottom. Those are feet. This map depicts the entire world as the literal body of Christ. The world is womb-like, safe inside the divine. It details over 1,600 individual drawings. It locates the Garden of Eden as a physical place. It fuses theology, zoology, and history into a single, overwhelming image where time and space are flattened into one plane. Here is the tragic twist. The map you just saw doesn't exist anymore. The original, which survived for 700 years, was destroyed during an Allied bombing raid on Hanover in 1943. It was incinerated in an instant. We only have black and white photos and color facsimiles to prove it was ever there. It is a ghost map. Its destruction serves as a brutal reminder. The sum total of human knowledge is fragile. We assume that once something is discovered, it is saved forever. But if the internet went dark tomorrow, would our understanding of the world vanish just as easily as the Ebstorf map did in the fires of World War II? Number 8. The Beatus Map, Saint Sever Beatus. If you opened Google Maps today and saw a labeled location for the Gates of Hell or the Garden of Eden next to your local Starbucks, you'd assume the software was glitching. But in the 11th century, the boundary between the real world and the mythological world wasn't just blurred, it was non-existent. Europe was in the grip of apocalyptic fever. People genuinely believed the end of days was coming, and they needed a guide not for commerce, but for the soul. The Saint Sever Beatus Map is a document that shouldn't exist, because it charts the apocalypse as if it were a road trip destination. It treats the events of the Bible not as ancient history, but as current geography. This is the map, created around 1060 AD. It looks more like a biological cell or a brain, doesn't it? First, look at this massive green shape sprawling across the middle. It looks like a tree or a spider. That is actually the Mediterranean Sea and the river networks. The map maker didn't care about the shape of the coastlines. He cared about how the water divided the lands. Now look at the very top. See the word oriens? That means east. In the Middle Ages, east was always up. And right below that text, do you see that enclosed box? That is the Garden of Eden. He drew it as a real physical place you could walk to. Finally, look at this strange red strip running down the right side. This represents the fourth continent, a land they believed existed in the south, but could never reach because the ocean was too hot. They populated it with monsters to scare people away. Scholars argue that this map was never meant to show you how to get from point A to point B. It was meant to show you how to get from Earth to heaven. It was a spiritual guide, a visualization of a commentary on the Book of Revelation. But the level of detail given to the mythical elements suggests that the creators believed these places were as concrete as the ground beneath their feet. It leaves us wondering, what mythical concepts do we treat as absolute scientific facts today, which will look utterly ridiculous and superstitious to the cartographers of the year 3000? Number 7. The Waldseemüller Map. Naming something is an act of power. If you name it, you own it. In the early 1500s, Europe was buzzing with rumors of a new world. A German cartographer named Martin Waldseemüller was working in a small town in France, trying to make sense of letters coming from a traveler named Amerigo Vespucci. Vespucci was a bit of a self-promoter, claiming he had found a new continent. Columbus, on the other hand, had gone to his grave insisting he had just found Asia. Waldseemüller made a choice that would change history. He believed Vespucci. He decided to draft a map that included a new landmass separate from Asia, and in the stroke of arbitrary genius, he feminized Amerigo's name and stamped the word America onto the parchment. This is the Universalis Cosmographia. It's huge, printed on 12 separate woodblock panels. It looks like a puzzle, doesn't it? The money shot is down here. Zoom in on this long, strange strip of land. Right there. Do you see that text? America. That is the birth certificate of the Western Hemisphere. It is the first time those 7 letters were ever written on a map. But look at the error. Look how close the edge of the map is to the coast of America. He depicts the Pacific Ocean as a tiny sliver of water. He thought if you sailed past America, you'd hit Japan immediately. He gave us the right name, but the wrong planet. The twist is, Waldseemuller later realized he might have jumped the gun. He realized Vespucci might have been exaggerating his role. In his later maps, Waldseemuller actually removed the name America and tried to call it Terra Incognita instead. He wanted to take it back. He wanted to delete the name. But it was too late. The 1507 map had already been printed and distributed. It had gone viral in 16th century terms. The name stuck. We live in a world named by a guy who realized his mistake and tried to delete it, but the momentum of history wouldn't let him. Number 6. The Tabula Peutingeriana. We tend to think of abstract linear maps as a modern invention. Think of the London Underground or the New York City subway map, where the winding curves of reality are straightened out into clean lines. We assume ancient people needed literal representations of the curves of the Earth. We are wrong. The Tabula Peutingeriana is a map that defies its era because it looks exactly like a schematic for a fiber optic network or a circuit board. Yet it was designed to guide Roman legions across an empire that spanned 3 continents. It prioritized connections over reality 1,500 years before the invention of the subway. We're going to scroll this map from left to right. Remember, west is left, east is right. We start here in the west. As we scroll, keep your eyes on those jagged red lines. Those are the Roman roads. This isn't a map of geography. It is a user manual for the highway system. It tells you exactly how far to walk to the next spa or town. We are passing through Europe now. Look at how squashed the land is. The mapmaker crushed the continents to fit them on this narrow scroll. He turned the Mediterranean Sea into a tiny ditch just to save space. Now look here towards the right side. This is Mesopotamia, modern-day Iraq. Do you see those 2 lines running parallel to each other? Those are the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. Even here, the Romans mapped every single outpost. And finally, we reach the Far East. We have walked all the way to India. We just crossed the entire known world in a straight line without ever seeing a true curve. It is a masterpiece of data compression. This captures the Roman mindset perfectly. They didn't care what the world looked like, they cared how to conquer it. Efficiency was their god. They didn't need to know the shape of the coast, they just needed to know how many days it took to march an army from Rome to Jerusalem. It makes you realize that accuracy is subjective. If a map gets you there on time, does it matter if it turns the entire planet into a flat pancake to do it? Number 5. The Tabula Rogeriana. In the 12th century, the world was on fire. The Crusades were raging. Christians and Muslims were supposed to be sworn enemies, locked in a holy war that seemed eternal. But on the island of Sicily, a rare thing happened. A Christian king named Roger II and a Muslim scholar named al-Idrisi committed an act of intellectual treason. They became friends. They ignored the war and worked together for 15 years to create a map. They interviewed thousands of travelers, cross-referenced their stories, and threw out any data that sounded like a myth. The result was an image so scientifically advanced, it effectively shamed the rest of the medieval world. Take a look at this masterpiece from 1154. At first glance, it looks alien. That's because Islamic cartographers put south at the top, so you're looking at the world upside down. First, let's talk about what is missing. Do not look for the USA or South America. They aren't here. To these people, the Atlantic Ocean was the end of reality. The map stops dead right where New York should be. Since north is at the bottom, Europe is crushed down here at the foot of the map. The UK and Scandinavia are depicted as cold, tiny islands at the very edge of the known world, barely worth mentioning. But look at the massive middle section. This charts everything from North Africa all the way to China in the east. It links the Silk Road to the Mediterranean. It proves that while Europe was in the Dark Ages, the rest of the world was connected, trading, and mapping every inch of the dirt. Here is the tragedy. The original map was engraved onto a massive disc of solid silver, weighing hundreds of pounds. But during a revolt shortly after it was made, the silver was likely looted, melted down, and lost forever. We only have the paper copies left. This masterpiece was a flash in the pan, a moment of clarity before the darkness of war closed back in. It proves that humanity had the tools to map the world perfectly, but we lost that knowledge to greed. How many other modern discoveries are currently sitting in lost books, victims of our refusal to work together? Number 4. The Hereford Mappa Mundi. If you travel to Hereford Cathedral in England, you can stand before the largest surviving medieval map in the world. It is a breathtaking artifact, but as you look closer, you realize this isn't a navigational tool. It's a horror movie. It maps the geography of fear.
In the medieval mind, the world was a struggle between the divine order of the center and the chaotic evil of the edges. This map tells you that if you stay in the center, you are safe. But if you wander to the periphery, the laws of God break down and the monsters take over. It is a zoology of nightmares preserved on vellum. This is the map created around 1300 AD. It is a classic TO map, meaning it depicts the entire human world as a flat circle. First, look at the very top. See that figure sitting on a throne above the circle? That is Jesus Christ. He is looking down on the world. This tells you immediately that this isn't about geography, it's about theology. Now look at the bullseye in the middle. That tiny dot is Jerusalem. To them, the holy city was the literal center of the universe. But the scary part is the outer rim. We won't make you squint to find them, but the edges of this circle are packed with drawings of monsters. Headless men, dog-faced warriors, and dragons. The mapmaker is sending a clear message. The center is safe. But the edges? The edges are where the nightmares live. The twist is that this map was likely used as a teaching tool for illiterate pilgrims, a medieval PowerPoint presentation on why they should be good Christians and stay close to the church. But the underlying message is chilling. The unknown is monstrous. It codified xenophobia into geography. It forces us to ask, when we look at the unknown parts of our modern world, like deep space or the deep ocean, are we seeing what's really there, or are we just populating the darkness with our own modern monsters because we are afraid of being alone? Number 3. Cosmos Indicopleustes. We often think of the progression of science as a straight line, always moving forward. We assume we get smarter every century, but history has a delete button. In the 6th century, a merchant-turned-monk named Cosmas decided that the pagan Greeks, with their spherical earth and astronomy, were insulting God. He wrote the Christian Topography to prove them wrong. He created a map that wasn't just inaccurate, it was a deliberate, calculated step backwards into ignorance. He tried to undiscover the shape of the earth because the science didn't match his specific reading of the Bible. You have to see this to believe it. This isn't a child's drawing. This is Cosmos's serious diagram of the universe. First, look at the shape. It isn't a sphere. It isn't even a circle. It is a rectangle. Cosmas believed the earth was a flat floor, exactly twice as long as it was wide, modeled after the tabernacle in the Bible. Now, look at the top. It has a rounded lid like a trunk or jewelry box. That represents the heavens. He literally put the universe inside a box. And if you're wondering where the sun goes at night, he didn't believe it went under the earth. He believed there was a giant mountain in the north, and the sun just hid behind it every night like a shy child. It is a map of pure fundamentalism. Even in his own time, many educated Christians thought Cosmas was an idiot. He wasn't the mainstream, he was the loud fringe. But his work survived while better science was lost or suppressed. It serves as a stark warning. Knowledge isn't permanent. It can be ideologically dismantled. Facts can be lost if they become politically or religiously inconvenient. It makes you wonder, what scientific facts are we currently unlearning simply because they don't fit the narrative of our time? Number 2. The Fra Mauro Map. Just before the dawn of the Age of Discovery, before Columbus sailed to America and before Vasco da Gama reached India, a monk in Venice created the definitive map of the medieval world. Venice was the crossroads of the world, a place where spies, merchants, and sailors swapped stories in taverns. This monk, Fra Mauro, listened to them all. He created a map that is spooky because it shows things that Europeans weren't supposed to know yet. It is a map that whispers of secret voyages and lost knowledge, effectively serving as the WikiLeaks of the 15th century. This is the Fra Mauro Map, completed around 1450. It looks overwhelming, but we can decode it. Once again, south is at the top. Start your eyes on the left side. Do you see that distinct blue shape? That is the Mediterranean Sea. Below it is Europe. Now look above that sea, towards the top of the circle. That huge landmass is Africa. To us, it looks upside down. Here is the impossible detail. Look at the very top edge. That is the southern tip of Africa. Fra Mauro drew a clear ocean path around it, connecting the Atlantic to the Indian Ocean. He did this 30 years before the Portuguese officially discovered that route. He knew Africa had an end, while most other maps showed it stretching on forever. Fra Mauro's map marks the exact moment the Middle Ages died and the Renaissance began. He moved Jerusalem away from the center. He removed the monsters. He chose science over religion. But the mystery remains. Where did he get the data for the coast of Africa? Who sailed there before the history books say they did? It suggests that history is written by the victors, but the maps are drawn by the people who actually did the work. And those two groups are rarely the same people. Number 1. The Babylonian Map of the World. We end at the beginning. Before satellites, before the compass, and before paper, there was just dirt. In the British Museum, there sits a shattered piece of clay about the size of an iPhone. It doesn't look like much. It looks like a cracker that was stepped on. But this is the Imago Mundi. Dating back to the 6th century BC, this is the oldest map of the known world ever discovered. It represents the absolute hard limit of ancient human knowledge. It captures the exact moment where geography turns into cosmic horror. Here it is. It looks like a rock, but it is a diagram of the universe. First, look at the top half. This block of cuneiform text isn't the map. It's the instruction manual. It describes the creation of the world. The map is down here. Look closely. Do you see that double ring etched on the clay? That is the Bitter River, the salt ocean that the Babylonians believed surrounded all land. Inside the ring is the known world. That rectangle in the middle, that is Babylon. They put themselves at the literal center of existence. But the scary part is what is outside the water. Look for the faint triangles poking out of the ring. These are labeled as regions or islands. This is where the map tells you the monsters live. Beyond those triangles, nothing, just the void. The text on the back describes creatures beyond the Bitter River that cannot be seen. This wasn't just a map of space. It was a map of their existential dread. They knew they were on a tiny island of life surrounded by an infinite, impassable ocean. And while we laugh at their bitter river and their triangles, look at a map of our solar system today. We are still on a tiny disk surrounded by an infinite, dark void that we can barely comprehend. The map hasn't changed. We just made the scale bigger. Number 0. The bonus. The Piri Reis Map. In 1929, historians dusting off shelves in Istanbul's Topkapi Palace found a jagged piece of gazelle skin that shouldn't exist. It was drawn in 1513 by an Ottoman admiral and pirate named Piri Reis. He claimed his source material came from ancient charts and captured maps from a Genoese infidel named Christopher Columbus. But when scholars looked at the bottom of the map, they stopped breathing. There, clearly drawn 3 centuries before its official discovery, was a coastline that should have been buried under ice. This single document launched 1,000 conspiracy theories about lost civilizations. This is the surviving fragment. It's a portolan chart used for navigation. Notice all those crisscrossing lines. Those are rum lines for setting a compass course. Let's orient you. This landmass on the right, that is the west coast of Africa. It looks perfect. And this landmass on the left, that is South America, specifically the coast of Brazil. But here is the smoking gun. Follow the coast of South America all the way down, right here. See how the land connects and turns to the right? That shouldn't be there. That looks exactly like the coast of Antarctica, but it looks like Antarctica without ice. This implies that someone mapped this coast thousands of years ago, before the ice caps froze over. The buzzkill reality is that Piri Reis likely just ran out of paper and bent the coast of Argentina to fit the page. Most serious historians reject the Ice Age theory. But here is the real mystery. The map explicitly cites a map of Columbus as a source, a document that has never been found. So even if it's not Antarctica, we are staring at the only surviving ghost of Columbus's lost knowledge. It forces us to ask, what else did the Genoese sailor know that history forgot to write down? So, there you have it. 10 maps that prove history is written in pencil, not ink. These cartographers didn't just draw land masses, they drew their fears, their gods, and their limitations. And looking at them today makes you wonder what parts of our perfect modern maps are just symbols we created to make ourselves feel safe. If you enjoyed this deep dive, make sure you hit that subscribe button. If you want to feel smarter than the person sitting next to you, drop a comment. Class dismissed.